Hello and welcome to This Is What Came Out of Me, a series about anything and everything, but mostly pop culture from TVs, movies, podcasts and YouTube. In each episode, I talk about things that have grabbed my interest and things that I think that you out there in the big wide world might be interested in. I'm SierraKiloBravo. Let's get into it! There have been many world events that are of such impact that people remember exactly where they were when they found out about them. For many, it's the assassination of President Kennedy, or the murder of John Lennon, or the fall of the Berlin Wall. For me, there's two. The first was the death of Princess Diana. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I just arrived at a rugby park to play a game with some mates, and this was the buzz of the conversation. The second was the terrorist attacks that took place on September the 11th, 2001, a date and event that is no doubt indelibly etched on the psyche of many in the world, whether you lived in the US at the time or not. The day was memorable for me for a number of reasons, the most significant being that I was due to get married 11 days later. My wife is Japanese and was living with my mum at the time, and we were preparing for family to arrive from the homeland to come and celebrate our special day. That day was a work day for me, and my normal routine was to get up, have a shower, and then head out the door. But for some reason that day, I felt compelled to turn on the TV. I did so, and the first thing I saw was the second plane hitting the Trade Center. It had actually happened earlier, and what I was seeing was a looping replay of what happened. I rushed out the door to work and listened to the radio news the whole way, and as I did so, a clearer picture of what had happened unfolded. We had friends holidaying in New York at the time, so my interest was more than just a morbid curiosity. I had skin in the game. At work, of course, everyone was talking about it, and as the day progressed, we heard that our friends were okay. They were in Battery Park at the time and saw the whole thing happen. The other thing to happen as the day progressed was the arrival of the photographs. You have to remember that in 2001, the internet and social media were in their infancy. In fact, I don't think Facebook even existed then. So there was no instant sharing or posting of pictures. They came either via the news or by email. And the pictures were terrifying. The explosions, the jumpers, the first responders gearing up with steely determination in their eyes. And then that horrifying moment when the towers went down. I clearly remember a shot from a helicopter as it happened, and my first thought was, they got everyone out, didn't they? Surely everyone got out? The videos of dust blasting through the street and people running, terrified for their lives, are still images that I clearly see in my mind, even now, 16 years later. I can only imagine what an impact it's had on people who were right there, up close and personal with it. I remember the amazing effort of the airports and airlines to ground all of their flights in a short space of time, and hearing that another plane that had been taken over had gone off the radar. Footage came in from the Pentagon of a smoking black hole, and the scale of the event really started to hit home. Now, I'm going to preface this next part with a caveat. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, nor do I believe that it was an inside job per se, or that there was some sort of global Illuminati plan in place. I am, however, a natural skeptic, and I do believe that we're lied to regularly by way of what you might call the mainstream narrative or mainstream media. While I didn't realize it at the time, my first trigger had unconsciously been pulled right there on 0 day. Remember I said earlier that there was a smoking black hole in the side of the Pentagon? My very first gut reaction was that the hole was too small for a jetliner to have caused it. When I first saw the picture, I remember asking the person that showed me if they were sure that it was a plane that hit it. I never thought much about it until I saw the CCTV footage that was released later showing the impact. What I saw on that CCTV footage looked nothing like a plane hitting a building. I mean, look at the footage shown here. Do you see anything there that looks even close to a Boeing 757? And remember, this is the Pentagon, one of the most important and secure buildings in America. Don't you think it's weird that this grainy, long distance, frame skipping video clip is the only footage to have been captured of the impact? Like I said earlier, I'm not getting into wild conspiracies, just pointing out that there's something that seems fishy about it. I doubt anyone would look at this without priming to say that this is Flight 77's impact on the Pentagon and come to the conclusion that this is a plane crash.
It might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual site of the building that's crashed in, and as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around, which would indicate that the entire plane crashed into the side of the Pentagon and then caused the side to collapse. Now, even though if you look at the pictures of the Pentagon, you see that the floors have all collapsed, that didn't happen immediately. It wasn't until almost about 45 minutes later that the structure was weakened enough that all of the floors collapsed.
I think most unprimed people would say it's footage of a missile impact. Again, I'm not saying that it was a missile impact, because that opens up all sorts of other questions like, how do you explain the broken lampposts on the path to the crash site? And if that's not Flight 77, then where did the plane and all the people go? All these questions are just things that have bothered me since seeing it in the days following the events. And there are some other things as well, probably things that you've heard a million times before. Like the collapse of the two towers, it's always seemed to me that this was much too extreme of a result for what triggered it all. Those buildings were enormous, much, much bigger than you can imagine if you've never seen them in person. A fully loaded 767 weighs over 100,000 kilograms, and while yes, that would make a huge impact if it hit a building, would it really be enough to bring that building down? I mean, if it hit the base and it took it out at the knees, so to speak, I could easily believe it. But both impacts were above half of the total heights of the buildings. People blame the fires and say that the steel beams would have melted the structure and weakened it. But surely beams would need sustained heat to melt like that. Could there really be enough heat generated from a plane exploding to melt them? We recently saw a long and hot burning fire in Greenfell, England, and that fire burned for 24 hours and took up to 60 hours before it was fully put out. That building never fell down, despite burning for a much longer period than the Twin Towers. Yes, of course, it wasn't hit by a jet, and it wasn't anywhere near the height of the towers, but of the three buildings, surely you'd think that the Greenfell Tower would have been the one to fall down. I don't know, I'm not an engineer, and I'm sure there's many people out there right now laughing at my stupid monkey science, but it's just another aspect of the day that's never really added up for me. Again, I'm not saying that there's some giant conspiracy, but maybe it was some sort of failsafe or self-destruction to protect whatever was contained in the government offices housed in those buildings. I would find that much more believable than melted steel beams. I mean, Building 7 is a very likely candidate for this, in my opinion. This one was not hit by a plane, it didn't have another building fall on it, and there were only a few fires and some debris damage on it, yet it too went down like a drunk, for no apparent reason. 1 minute it's standing there, and then the next thing it just falls straight down. It doesn't tip over or fall all over the place, it goes straight down, exactly like you've seen buildings do in a controlled demolition. And then there's some little things like the terrorists' passports, which not only survived a fiery crash, but also the ensuing destruction under tons and tons of metal and concrete. I don't know, just something seems very fishy about certain parts of what are now the official story of what happened that day. Speaking of wreckage and debris, sorry, I don't mean to rant, but have you ever seen photos of the crash site of Flight 93 in Jacksonville? Well, First, let's have a look at some other crash sites where planes have hit the ground. Notice the wreckage spread everywhere. Notice how much of it there is. Notice the recognizable aeroplane parts. Notice the wide area across which it's all strewn. Well, look here at a photo taken soon after the Jacksonville crash. Do you notice anything different? Notice how it looks absolutely nothing at all like an actual plane crash site? It looks more like a plane-shaped object was burned in situ. But I don't know, again, if the plane didn't crash and the site is a setup, then like the Flight 77 that hit the Pentagon, where did Flight 93 and all the passengers go? I don't know. I don't have the answers for any of the questions that I've raised, but I just can't shake the feeling that there's something fishy about some parts of this official narrative of what happened that day. Not the whole thing, of course, just some parts of it seem a little weird to me. Whatever happened, it was a terrible day, and it's one that's etched in the minds of anyone who witnessed it, either directly or via the news coverage. I work in the middle of Melbourne City in Australia, and I ride the train to work every day, and often as I come in, I can see the airliners banking across the city as they move towards the airport. I often take a moment when I'm in the city to look up at the buildings around me. The people on September the 11th were exactly the same as me, exactly the same. They were going about their day, heading to the office, thinking about where they might get their coffee from. Sometimes I try to imagine what it might be like to look across the Yarra River to South Bank and see one of those planes crash into the Eureka Tower, or to see the Rialto Towers disappear in a fireball. I can imagine what it would be like to see that happen, but I bet it's nothing even close to the reality. One thing stands out to me from September the 11th, and the moments after the second plane hit, when people realized that this was a planned attack and not just a terrible accident. In that moment, people changed. The world changed. Some ran away, and some ran toward it. We're all just people going about our day, and life is short. You never know what's around the corner. Make the most of each day, and most important of all, be excellent to each other. Well, that's all for this time. I hope you enjoyed it. Check the notes for links to some of the things that I've talked about today. Until next time, I'm SierraKiloBravo, and this is what came out of me.